Welcome back to The Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is your host, Kate. Amber Johnson, a leadership coach and consultant who relies on the principles of appreciative inquiry and values-driven leadership to help clients uncover uncommon insight, is back for another conversation in The Comfy Chairs. When Amber joined me this spring, we discussed the use of questions as a leadership tool. Today, we will narrow our focus to understand how leaders and employees can leverage questioning skills and techniques to enhance learning. Questions are an integral part of any learning experience, whether in formal settings or casual interactions. From the Socratic method to appreciative inquiry, learners and teachers all know that the right question can unlock knowledge, wisdom, and growth. Welcome back to The Comfy Chairs, Amber. Thank you for coming out to play again. As always, I do like to let my guests have a moment to introduce themselves, so please.
It's so great to be back here, Kate. Thank you for inviting me, and great to chat with your folks again, too.
Mm-hmm.
I am a Chicago-based leadership consultant and communications person. And my real passion is helping executives and leaders figure out what is going on. And there's big questions in that, but we've got to figure out, there's these thorny situations. How do we mediate that? How do we resolve the tensions? How do we get people aligned? And how do we bring people along in our processes and in their own development? And one of the great joys in my life right now, I'm working on a TEDx talk that I get to give in a couple of weeks.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
I don't know if you've ever worked with it or if any of your listeners have, but they make you choose a job title, and it can't be like consultant. It has to be something interesting. And so my title for TEDx is that I am an inquiry architect.
Ooh.
And I just absolutely love that. I'd like t-shirts that say inquiry architect. But the idea is that really I just help people write the questions that they're going to ask of themselves, of their colleagues, of their friends, to help them think a little differently about the work and the life they do and the life they lead.
No. Questions are... So I am a big proponent of curiosity, and I think questions are the currency of being a curious person, and coaching people to ask better questions. I think it's a bit of a superpower, and also an underused technique in coaching and in learning. Frankly, we tend to ask questions of people rather than letting the learner be the question asker. That's sort of the traditional teacher at the front of the classroom model. And there's so much research trying to show that that's not really applicable for us anymore. The ways that we teach, not just at the elementary or even collegiate level, but in the classrooms that we have in our workplaces. We have opportunities to do different as the world keeps changing around us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know that saying that questions are important to learning is more than a little bit obvious. But I do want to start with that idea to examine why questions matter. And what exactly is it about a good question that can lead to lasting learning? So what are your thoughts, ma'am?
Yeah. One of the folks I often quote is William Isaacs. He's an MIT professor. He wrote the book Dialogue, which is one of my favorite books on communication and conversation. And he says the most important parts of any conversation are the part neither party could have imagined at the start. And the thing is, if I am always asking questions that I know the answer to, how are you? How is work? I know exactly the script that you're going to give me. But if I take time to ask a question I don't know the answer to, that leads us into the most important parts of the conversation. And so I think one of our most essential qualities as teachers, as leaders, as educators, as parents, as friends is to cut the predictable questions and ask questions that you don't know the answer to. Humbly ask questions you don't know the answer to, because that's when you're going to reach that unexpected point of learning.
Let's go through the exercise of defining what a powerful question is or isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think first and maybe most obvious is powerful questions are open questions
Hmm.
rather than being closed and predictable. That's the very first thing. But open to closed or closed to open is a continuum.
Yes.
And the wider open we can push it, the more unexpected we get. So, do you like books is a closed question with
Hmm.
yes, no as an answer. What is your favorite book is an open question, but it's going to give you one title. What do you like about fantasy books, or what makes for a strong character? That
Hmm.
is going to tell you something more about the person you're talking with. It'll give you a predictive quality too of whether you should make a recommendation or whether
Right.
you have something in common or whether you might learn from something that you might not. So we have to think of closed to open as a continuum and not satisfy ourselves with any question that can't be answered with yes or no, but really push it open to how do I get to something less expected.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's the first quality of a powerful question is really focusing on something that is beyond, that isn't closed, something that's wider open.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think a next quality is focusing on questions that are positive. And when I say positive, you may think that are only about the rosy things, only about the good things. I don't mean positive in that Pollyannish sense. I mean it in the generative sense, in what my line of work we might say the appreciative sense. I mean
Yeah.
positive in it's helping us move towards the future, and it is assuming the best. It's showing positive regard
Hmm.
to the other person.
Yeah.
So, is that what you're wearing? Is a question, but it's got a lot of tone in it, right? It doesn't
Yes.
show positive regard. And by the same token, if you and I worked for the same company and we put an event on last night and it didn't go so great, and I said, what didn't work last night?
Hmm.
That's actually a useful. It's we need that information, but a more powerful question might be to say, if we were going to do this again, what would we do differently?
Hmm.
How would we make this even better? Because then it's framed in the positive, it's framed for the benefit of the future, and it removes our reflexive defensiveness from the conversation and allows us, it gives us freedom to reimagine.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the great things that powerful questions do.
Yeah. I'm going to flip things around a little bit. I know in my notes that I shared with you, I wanted to talk about appreciative inquiry as kind of a coda, if you will, to bring us home.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because you've started introducing some of the things that are vital to appreciative inquiry, I'd like to go ahead and go there now.
Sure.
Um, I am very novice in the practice. I've studied a little bit. It's not something that I use regularly, so I know just enough to be dangerous. I would like to defer to you because I know it is part of how you coach and consult. So, can you tell us a little bit, kind of the Cliff Notes version of appreciative
Mm-hmm.
inquiry, and then we can kind of explore what role it can play for us when we want to be learning.
Appreciative inquiry is a organizational change and leadership development process that came out of Case Western Reserve University in the late 1980s and has been used across the world in organizations and in the lives of individuals ever since.
Hmm.
I have used it in conversation with one person at the dinner table, and I've used it with 1,000 people in a diffused environment where we are never in the same room together, and I've used it with 200 people in the same room together. It can be used in so many different formats. But when it comes to appreciative inquiry, you can also kind of think it as a cheat code to asking a good question
Hmm.
because there's a pattern that appreciative inquiry follows
Hmm.
and three types of questions that are very, very common in an appreciative inquiry process. Before I can tell you those questions, though, I have to give you a couple of principles.
Yes,
And
please.
this goes back to your earlier question about what makes for a powerful question. I think these qualities make for a powerful question as well. So, three principles of appreciative inquiry. The first is the appreciation principle. That means we are going to ask about when we are at our best. So
Hmm.
think about appreciation in the sense of how a home appreciates in value or a good bottle of wine
Yeah.
appreciates in value. It grows over time, and the assets are there, are true, are part of its DNA. So we want to always ask questions about when we're at our best around whatever topic we're discussing, what's true, because the qualities you surface there are what you want to carry forward.
Yes.
The second principle is the inquire principle, which is to remember to actually use questions. So often we just sort of come in with discussion with a topic, but we don't actually inquire. And in appreciative inquiry in particular, we believe our questions are fateful. And I'll give you a very quick example of this. If I asked you, Kate, are you tired today? You would do this like fast scan of your body and be like, oh, yes, I haven't been outside all day and it's gloomy outside. And I watched a second episode last night when I probably should have just gone to bed and didn't get my workout in. And you'd have a list of all of the things that were making you feel tired. And if I asked you instead, what's energizing you this week? You would do that same scan of your calendar of your life, and you'd tell me about the dinner plans with a girlfriend and the book you're reading that's really inspiring you, and the walk you're going to take with your husband in a few hours. You'd tell me all of these good things in your life. Our questions are fateful. And so as leaders and as leaders using appreciative inquiry, we've got to ask questions about the things we really want happening in the world. And then the final principle, I call it the involve principle. It's an inclusion principle or the wholeness principle, could be other words for it. But the idea is that it's impossible for the CEO to have all of the best ideas. It's just impossible. And so we need to ask as many people as possible. And the asking does two things. One, it gives us more ideas to work with. But two, when you invite people into the process of getting ideas out there and then choosing between them and shaping what evolves from it, an initiative that evolves from it, we know people will support what they help to create, that they will be invested from the start. And especially inside organizations, you can shortcut a lot of the buy-in period because people are going to support what they help to create. We informally sometimes call it the IKEA effect, which is the idea that $100 dresser you bought at IKEA and it took you 3 hours to put together, you actually have more love and affection for, and you will move it from house to house to house.
Yes.
Because of the sweat equity in it. We love what we labor for. And so when we invite people to labor in the ideas with us, when we ask questions of them, then we have their support from the start. All right, those are the three principles. And now we can actually talk about how they show up in the questions of appreciative inquiry. And like I said, these are the cheat code questions that you take these questions and then you use them like a template and you swap out the topics and you elaborate around them a little, but you just ask these same three questions for anything that's going on. So the first is what I call the high point experience question. So let's imagine that we are trying to improve compliance. We're trying to shorten compliance time in our organization. We spend 2 weeks of every month just on compliance. We could get that done in a week on our regulatory processes in a week, then we'd have 3 weeks for more innovative work or more advancing other things. So a high point experience question around that topic that may seem kind of dull is, hey, I know we have real obligations in terms of compliance, but there are probably times in your life where you've seen us be able to move a compliance process really quickly. Tell me a story about a specific time when we've been at our best around compliance. What happened? What were the results? Who was involved? What was your contribution? What was the contribution of others? What was it about the organization, our ways of working, the circumstances, our culture, our tools, our resources that made that possible? And that question helps us believe in the future and believe that these are real possibilities. I asked that very question about compliance in an organization who told me it was impossible to do it faster. But then they realized that their industry was influenced by the weather. So when there was a hurricane, they could get compliance through faster. Yes. So it was entirely possible to do it. We just had to have a fast track process, and it helped them see that there are circumstances in which we can do it faster. How could we learn? What were we doing there? And they've discovered they were doing things like having a 10-minute stand-up meeting every morning where they knocked out a bunch of requirements real fast. Instead of waiting on it to land in your inbox and waiting for you to click yes and it goes to the next person. They found all these ways just in asking that question. So that's a high point experience question. The second question is the images of the future question. And in it, you say something like, okay, imagine it's 5 years from now, or 3 years, or 3 months, whatever a reasonable time frame is. And we are we are so smoking fast when it comes to compliance. Our processes are down to 6 days a week. If that were the 6 days a month, if that were the case, if we were the most expedited, most amped up, most just efficient process of compliance possible, what would be happening? What would be new? What would be different? What would it mean in terms of the technology we were using? What would it mean in terms of who had to give approvals? What would it mean in terms of the work that you were then had time for to do? What would it mean in terms of your role and my role? And you ask people to describe it. And notice in the first question, we asked for a real story. And in this question, we're not asking for a bullet list of ways to make compliance faster. We're asking them to imagine it already is faster and tell me what they see. Mm-hmm. And that's a visualization process. And you know this from watching professional athletes. Visualization is absolutely essential for succeeding at a task. We have to believe we can succeed at it before we actually can figure out how to do it. And so that visualization is really important. So we've got the high point experience question, the images of the future, and the third and final question is the one that gets practical. And it says, if that's the future we want, what are the 3 most important things we need to do to make it happen? Or maybe it's the 5 most important things. Or maybe you have to say, where do we need to be in 7 years? And then what do we have to do this year to start getting us there? But it takes it from this blue sky idea and lets us narrow it into something we can get into a bite-sized piece, something that we can build action around. Those are the 3 questions of appreciative inquiry. They're powerful. They are flexible. You just pop out one topic, pop in another, and they're different. They're focused on that future, that positive regard and mm-hmm. positive future focus that I was talking about.
Yeah. I mean, there is, as you've pointed out, there's a time and place to understand what went wrong. But when we start with the problem, it does tend to, it sets a template. It sets a template for what mm-hmm. we're going to do. It restrains us, puts us in a mindset of, well, this is what's wrong. We have to avoid wrong, as opposed to when have we been at our best? When have we been successful? What will it look like? And you had very kindly asked me about the workbook I published earlier this year. The what do we have to do to get there is sort of the central idea of the last portion of the work people go through in creating that personal vision statement. And I love that you brought up visualization because it is so powerful. Mm-hmm. The studies, what is it, basketball? Practicing 3-point throws. Mm-hmm. They've studied where they've split the subjects up, and one group was directed to practice, to actually do the practice for 3 months or some determined length of time. The other study group, they were told not to do the practice, but to do the visualization. And at the end of that time, there was obviously a significant improvement in the people that did the physical practice, but there was also a significant improvement, not to the same extent, but of research significance, that visualizing intentionally and repeatedly doing the shot well actually helped people improve their scores.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that is why questions, but appreciative inquiry, flavored questions can be so powerful when we come to learning moments, mm-hmm. whether you're in a leadership role or in a learner role, an employee role, thinking about what is good in this, what is working well, what will it take to improve or to maintain success. That discovery, looking to discover through that lens, it just wires you ahead of time to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. If you came to me as an individual and said, I'm terrible at public speaking and I've really got to learn to be better at this, I wouldn't say, oh, tell me about how nervous you are. I would say, oh, Okay. Well, first let's have a conversation about how this could be good for your career, how it
Mm-hmm.
could be good for your life. What would it feel like to be good in that way? Tell me about a time you've talked in public. Maybe it was even just asking a question in a meeting
Mm-hmm.
and you did feel that way. Okay. And so what else was true in that circumstance? And we'd start to build for you a set of examples that tell you, I already have this capacity in me and I can learn and grow and develop my skill by leaning into what already exists instead of trying to fabricate something or go get an entirely new skill that I'm, bereft of. You actually have it
Mm-hmm.
in you already. And the learning is going to happen faster as a result.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember in one of your articles that I read uh, in preparation for our first recording, talking about some of the benefits of being a questioning person.
Mm-hmm.
One of them being that people perceive folks who ask questions as intelligent.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about sort of that, not necessarily the research, but essentially what it means for that and how that can be good for self-perception as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, the research, and there's not as many research around asking questions as I want there to be. And so I want to admit that. But in this research study, what they found is that specifically when we need to ask for help or ask to understand something, we often feel like, "Oh, I'm going to label myself as ignorant and uninformed by asking this question, or I don't want to be the type of person that seems like I have to have help." And so we're hesitant to ask
Mm-hmm.
for wisdom, for advice, for insight, for support. And instead of actually thinking that you're uninformed, what tends to happen is I go to you, Kate, and say, I need your help. And you, instead of thinking, gosh, Amber's the real idiot that doesn't know, you think, Amber's so smart, she trusted me for advice. And so you actually see me as smarter because I didn't know something and came to ask for it. And people have probably had this experience in meetings. You're sitting in a meeting, maybe you're the junior colleague, the meeting's moving a little fast, you've got a question, you don't understand something, and you have the courage to raise your hand to ask, and you do it with trepidation, thinking people are going to think I'm an idiot that I don't know this. And instead you ask the question and you see all the heads nod like, thank you.
Right.
Thank God somebody asked.
Yes, I have been that person. The fleeting embarrassment of saying I don't know is
Yeah.
definitely worth the benefit of learning, whether
Yeah.
it's what an acronym means or what the strategic plan everyone's referencing that I've never seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, in preparing for this session, I was doing a little research of my own, and I wanted to think about the Socratic method, which
Yes.
is the idea of an informed teacher, instead of lecturing, actually helping the students ask questions and engage with ideas and dialogue until they come to a new point of understanding. I love it. It's progress towards new material. It does sort of assume the teacher knows the answer, but this is so fascinating to me. Socrates called it a midwifery process.
Oh,
Isn't that
well,
gorgeous?
of course it
This
is.
idea that you're birthing ideas in people, that you are helping them bring forth new understanding that's almost like new, that is as grand as new life, or as, that
Mm-hmm.
has some value, like new life has value. And I love that process. It does presume that there is a leader who has the answers. And I think it's even more important for us to ask questions in the moments where I don't know the answer. I'm the leader. I don't know. You're the leader. You don't know.
Yes.
We're in a room together. We don't know. And I think it's so essential in those moments to be asking questions, to be playing with ideas, to be integrating ideas, to be midwifing our own idea birthing process by asking questions we don't know the answer to.
One of the things I love about that conceptually is that it sets yes, there is an informed teacher or leader who can help feed the answer if it doesn't come. But it's saying that you, recipient of the question, employee, student, learner, you have within you the ability to create this.
Mm-hmm.
That the level of respect and valuing of that person's intrinsic worth that comes with that perspective on it It's beautiful. It's
It's absolutely
beautiful.
beautiful.
It
Yeah,
really
it's the
is.
positive regard we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also love this idea then that ignorance is not a moral failing.
Mm,
It's the lack of opportunity to gestate an idea, to be exposed to something new.
yeah.
And that,
Ignorance is not a moral failing, but staying in ignorance. I don't want to judge somebody else, but to stay in ignorance is a failure.
well, it's the know better, do better, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you've never had the opportunity to encounter information or an experience or a person that has a different background than you, if you've never had that experience, of course there's going to be ignorance, a lack of knowledge there. But you have the opportunity and you either choose not to take it or you take nothing from it. I agree. There are so many reasons why someone could choose to remain ignorant, but it's hard not to judge.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Socratic method. I've been thinking through, in addition to like appreciative inquiry, what are some of the other methods and techniques that we've encountered that have been effective to discovery and learning? I think the scientific method shows us that starting with a question is the path to that. There is a process used in quality circles called root cause analysis, the 5 whys, that by asking why multiple times, you're able to drill down into what is the cause of the event, which is a type of learning. I've been able to use that with coaching, with facilitating meetings as well for group processes. What are some other ones, ma'am?
One of my favorites, I call it recombination,
Oh.
or integrative thinking is another name for it. And it's the idea of let's take two unlike things and figure out how they fit together and how they inform each other. So if any of your listeners are old enough to remember the Reebok pump shoe, this is because Reebok was trying to figure out how to take over market share, and they wanted more stability around ankles. And there was somebody in the room who happened to have medical experience. And he said, what if we took a tennis shoe and the blood pressure pump experience and we put those two things together? That's recombination. If you use Spot Hero to get your parking spot, that's a recombination of a traditional parking lot and a reservation system. It's a recombination of ideas. And we can intentionally ask recombination ideas in our life. If you're a person who attends a church, you could ask, how can a church be more like a bar? That's going to lead you to a great conversation. Maybe you were in charge of onboarding at your organization and you ask the question, how could onboarding be more like a party than a sterile process? So you pick some unlike thing and you combine it. I work with some public libraries, and some of them have been asking, how should our library be more like Netflix? How should our library be more like Amazon?
Yeah, awesome.
See how many ideas just immediately. I mean, you're not even a librarian, but I bet you already have 10 ideas of what that could mean. And two of them are probably worth digging into and building together and having a conversation around. So that idea of recombination is borrowing a line from product development and marketing and figuring out how do we bring unlike ideas together to learn.
Yeah. I think learning is at its best kind of a magpie activity. Oh, there's a practice over there. I'm going to steal that and put it in my nest. There's a practice over there that I think lifelong learners are able to scan the environment and find shiny objects, essentially.
Yeah. As I was thinking about today, I was thinking about something related to that. I don't know if you're familiar with the Center for Creative Leadership and their model of how learning happens as adults.
Okay.
It's called the 70-20-10 model.
Yes, yeah, I am very familiar.
I am sure a lot of your listeners are well, but the idea is that Only 10% of our learning comes from sort of formal classroom experiences
Mm-hmm.
or picking up books. That's just 10% of our learning. And then the 20%, they call it developmental relationships.
Other people.
Um,
Yes.
Other people, our observation and reflection of other people. And then the 70% comes from challenging new
Mm-hmm.
experiences, from taking this idea you learned in a book or you learned from observing someone else and actually doing the elbow grease work of
Mm-hmm.
trying to apply it in your situation and figuring out what works and doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think what's fascinating about that is when we apply it to questions is what does it mean to do that elbow grease work of applying ideas? How do I get in there and fight with the ideas and wrestle with them, and not in a animosity sort of way, but in a let them live in my space and test ideas through conversation, through literal pilot tests, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
How do we learn in those challenging experiences of applying ideas?
Well, it's a wonderful model. So, yes, very familiar with the 70-20-10, and it's an older formula, but it is time tested. It's shown over
Mm-hmm.
time that this is true, that the most effective learning comes from challenging assignments. There is value in formal learning, reading classes,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't want to overload in those settings. And that tells us something about the types of questions we can pursue, and where we ask them as well.
Mm-hmm.
That the more kind of formal, let me go research this, let me go to the library questions, if you will, they have value. But if those are all we're asking, we aren't necessarily gaining skill or experience. It's simply knowledge
Yeah,
for us.
absolutely.
Other people, watching, reflecting on them, but also asking other people to share knowledge, to demonstrate skills, that we start rounding out our learning capability when we engage with others. And then the questions that take us into the field, if you will, become the most impactful for us. It's not just, what does it take to do X? Tell me about X. It's how will I get it done?
Mm,
Then
yeah,
too. And it can be a pathway to lasting learning. You can
yeah.
start with I'm going to look up a book or article on this. Then I'm going to go talk to someone about it. And then I'm going to go do it.
Mm-hmm. And then the step after that is, I did it. What have I learned?
Mm-hmm. The reflection. Yeah.
The reflection. Bob Quinn at University of Michigan, I once heard him say that as adults, we learn leadership through crisis or self-reflection. And most of us try to avoid crisis. So we've got to get in there with the self-reflection.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so true that we get so busy, we stop to ask, what did I learn?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think it has to be in your life. It can be if you're observing something going down in your organization, maybe you're at a distance from it, but it didn't happen the way you thought it should. Just even doing a little thought process as you drive home at night. If I were in charge of that, what might I have done?
Mm-hmm.
What would I have added to that process, or where would I have communicated differently? You can even learn from somebody else's experiences
Yes.
when we pause for self-reflection,
Yeah.
for reflection.
Well, and that's, I think, why one of the reasons professionally why mentorship is so important, combined with a very robust active reflection practice. Yeah. In some of the, I'm big into create a model for how to do it. I like people to have mental models that help them walk through processes. And when I was leading a learning department, I created a set of guidelines for how we were doing self-study, like virtual self-study modules. It was you would encounter, like, here's the information that we want you to know, the skill, the thing. The next part was reflect. What does this mean for me? And then there was the assignment to apply what you'd learned, get the practice. So it is that continuum that we're talking about. I really appreciate you bringing up CCL and letting me do my learning and development nerd moments, because one of the things I shared with you in my notes, in my own L&D practice as a consultant, because I like mental models, I have a model that works in the background for how I think about coaching, creating learning experiences. And because I like to entertain myself when I name things, I call it the learning engine. Like, what is it that powers learning? And I think of it as a 4-stroke engine. My husband was a mechanic for a while. What I think the skills that contribute to effective lifelong learning are curiosity, empathy, courage, and endurance. And that we want to, one, teach people those skills, but also create ways where they are practicing those things and leveraging them to learn stuff. So curiosity obviously has a connection to questions. I've already made that case. But I'm very curious, Amber, for you, how do you think being skilled at questions, what I will call question acumen, functions inside that learning engine? Well, do you think it does, for starters?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love your tendency towards building a model because it helps you repeat what's worked and learn. It's a self-reflection process in and of itself. Let's just take empathy as an example, which is the second piece of your model, curiosity and then empathy. I think another attribute of powerful questions I didn't mention earlier is that powerful questions often seek understanding. They ask about feelings rather than just facts. And this might be more important now than it ever has been in our society, because we know that when people don't feel understood and when they feel lonely, it leads to mistrust, and that's fuel for conspiracy theories. And so learning to ask questions that help you understand, that show positive regard and empathy towards the other person, and that seek to understand their experience, I think is vital for our relationships. It's absolutely essential for a healthy society. And it's at the heart of what it means to be human in our work as well.
Yes.
That we're not just so focused on process and results that we forget that it's people that made it possible in the first place.
I have nothing to add to that, Amber. I agree more than 100%. And I feel like in asking the questions of, what is this like? What don't I know? Can I seek to understand? What a learner is doing in that process is beginning to collect evidence of their capability or new knowledge that I think drives the courage to go again, to ask the next question, to make the next attempt at something new, to possibly fail. But then you have the opportunity to ask yourself the question, I've done it once before, I can do it again, right?
Yeah.
The answer's right. And that's endurance. And you're constantly fueling this process inside yourself, engaging with the world around you, that starts with what if, why, how, and takes you through.
I like your word courage. And I might say that courage also needs, backing it up, agency, a sense that I trust myself and my confidence. My self-confidence is not that I know the answer, but I know the next thing to try, the next question to ask. It's a learning orientation, and that I also trust myself to have the courage to show up and do the next thing. What is the next small action that I can take to move this forward? And I think that's essential to learning, is not expecting yourself to have the full answer, but to have something that gets you closer, one step closer today. If I know a little more today than I did before, then I have succeeded. And that's often grounded in the questions that we ask, starting first with, what's even possible here?
Yes. Yeah. There is so much power in those simple questions, the elementary questions that we encountered the concepts of, as far back as I can remember in school, the what, where, why, who, and how.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That if we can answer those in most circumstances, it gives us the information we need to make decisions, to move forward, to determine what our next steps are. And I've seen it play out in performance management, in times of change, in interpersonal relationships. And if you can just take yourself through that simple set of fundamental, elementary topics, it leads, it just it busts the door down for more different, better.
Let me just double click on that, particularly for the workplace, because I think on teams, and especially project teams, it's a failure to be clear on the answers to some of those really basic questions that gets us stuck and stalled and stymied. We don't know what role. I know my role in the organization. What role do I play on this team? So we don't have that who question clarified. We know our end goal is this, but why does it matter? We know our end goal is this, but how are we supposed to make decisions? Do we have the authority to make decisions, or are we kicking a recommendation up in the process? And then just the record keeping of it. So it's asking the questions and actually keeping a record of the answers. I find that to be a standard failure too.
Right. There is, I never accurately remember the name of it. There is a team performance model. I think it's Sibley. I'll look it up. I will look it up in there. I will link to it. But it's this wonderful visual of, kind of think of a ball hitting the ground and then going where it's intended. But you start with answering for people, why am I here? What's my role? Well, and then next, why are these other people here? Orienting people to their role, what other people are there for, building trust and respect in from the start allows you to move through to this point of, we get it and now we can perform.
Exactly. Yeah, I call it goals, roles, and protocols.
Yes, I like that a lot.
You know, honestly, let me just be honest about that language. For years, we called it goals, roles, and guidelines. And not long ago, I was thinking to myself, there's got to be, I want it to feel memorable. And I used ChatGPT and I said, here, I'm describing this. And I want something that means like guidelines, guardrails, and it spit out protocols in 10 seconds. And that's, I think, an aspect of asking questions that we haven't mentioned yet is that prompt engineering, to use the fancy language for it, is actually a great way to learn. It's a great way to learn.
Well, that echoes back to our conversation this spring, that you get the answers to the questions you ask. So how you form your question is going to result in the answer you get.
Absolutely.
And ChatGPT, all of AI is teaching us that the quality of our prompts, prompt being a synonym for question, is showing up in the quality of what's produced for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you can teach yourself a lot about great questions and how to learn from them by a little bit of play, which I think is another thing in talking about the reforming. There's courage, I believe, in asking a question or saying, I don't know, would you explain it? There's also courage in the work world and in being an adult, a professional, in letting yourself be playful with things. What would it look like for this experience to be more like that other experience that I had? That's playful. Taking some time to play with ChatGPT for no other purpose than I want to learn more about how to do this better. We have to be willing to not take ourselves too seriously. that the topic can be very serious. The outcomes or the consequences can be serious in nature, but we can engage our imagination and our questions in ways that are playful or light.
Yeah, I mean, to bring it back to appreciative inquiry, when we're doing appreciative inquiry in a formal process and a bunch of people in a room together, we ask that images of the future question, where we have them describe what they most want. We have them ask it one-on-one in an interview, and then we have them discuss it with 6 people at a table. And then we say, okay, figure out what your shared vision of the future is. And then after we've let them do that for like 15 minutes, we say, in 15 minutes, you have to give a presentation. It has to be a creative presentation. It can be a skit, it can be a game show, it can be a weather report, whatever it is, but you have to present your vision of the future creatively, and everyone has to participate. And there's groans in the room. And then I roll out my prop basket, and I've got magic wands and cowboy hats and magnifying glasses. And then people start to play, and then they put on these adorable skits. And I know that you're thinking, why is that part of a business meeting? But people feel it for a minute. They feel that future. The compliance group I'm talking about, the most memorable one, these were a bunch of engineers, a bunch of guys who had been doing this work for ages. They came to work in their jeans and their work boots, and they put their head down and drank their coffee and got their work done. And they created a lip sync to the song "I'm Too Sexy For." You remember that song?
Yes.
I'm too sexy. It was "I'm Too Sexy for Compliance."
Nice.
They strutted the runway like models. These 50-year-old men strutted and named all the things about they were too sexy for this clunky compliance process. They had so much fun. They laughed. And at the end of that day, it was a 2-day process. A few of those men cried and said, I did not know I could have fun at work. I thought it was all drudgery, and I did not know my voice could influence the process. And I think that play is absolutely essential for believing I have influence, I have voice. I don't have to take myself too seriously. I can throw out some idea knowing that it's half-baked, but I feel safe to do it because the spirit of play is present.
Yeah, we spend far too much time at work to be miserable. And to, we're not made for drudgery. We're made for joy, in my personal opinion. But yeah, I'm really curious, Amber. I would like to ask you a question about what questions are you chasing right now? Like, what in your work is interesting, curious, stuck in your teeth?
Yeah. In the point of history that we're recording this today, it's been a tumultuous season in American history. And I don't know when this is going to go live, and I will avoid being political. But it's a rough season.
It is.
It's a rough season. And I am working hard to find questions that I can ask of someone who disagrees with me about something I feel strongly. And I want questions I don't know the answer to, and that I can ask authentically and with positive regard for the other person. And so what is really sticking in my head is, how do I show up in conversations where there's conflict? And particularly conflict I feel emotionally, not work conflict over which business model are we going with, but where I feel the weight of it. It impacts people I love or my ideas of democracy. How do I show up in those moments and ask authentically curious questions with positive regard? Because I am absolutely convinced that our tendency to ask questions we know the answer to, or to ask questions is to frame them as a trap or a gotcha or to prove wrongness, is only exacerbating problems, particularly in our families.
Yes.
I'm honest about my ability to influence the broader, governmental processes, but I can have some influence in my family and my community. But I won't succeed if my agenda is overriding my authentic curiosity. and my ability to hold the humanity of another person as I ask them a question. And so that's what's really on my mind this week in human history and as a professional and a citizen.
Well, thank you. Thank you. One of the things I think is interesting about that is some of the approaches that we've talked about are not necessarily apt for that circumstance. The Socratic method of, I have the answer, but I'm going to ask to elicit learning in you, isn't the right way to go into that. Is you don't want to presume correctness, if you will, for lack of a better word. As you said, questions that you don't know the answers to. Yeah, I think there is the moment in history that we're talking about, but then there's also just in terms of how we are as people together in moments of conflict. Because if you get two people in a room, you will have conflict eventually. I have conflict with myself. I don't need anyone else around. So are we able to navigate conflict with a questioning heart? I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and some humility.
Because the payout for that is not just conserving or preserving relationships. It's an opportunity to learn.
That's right.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you. It is always such a delight. I appreciate you giving me more time and more exposure to the way you think and all of your knowledge. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing all of your ideas and the wonderful people you discover with the world. It's a gift.
Thank you for joining me today. If this conversation sparks something useful, please follow the Comfy Chairs and leave a review. Those small actions help more people find the show. Got a leadership question you'd like featured in a future Comfy HQ episode? Please send it my way. I'd love to hear what's on your mind. And when you're ready to move from ideas into action, 123 Limited helps leaders build stronger teams, sharper strategies, and better talent plans. Learn more at 123limited.com. That's ONE23LTD.com. Thanks for listening.